Hello, my name is Charlotte Meehan, and I thank you for your attention. Today I will be discussing my education, social justice, and equity topic, which is support for queer or LGBTQ youth in their educational journey through our American education system. So, as one could imagine, as a minority group, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community, also known as the LGBTQ community, which I will be referring to them as for the remainder of this presentation, they face a lot of harassment and bullying from our society, and this doesn't limit itself to just outside of our school system. LGBTQ students are bullied at disproportional rates in comparison to their cisgender and heterosexual counterparts. In a journal written by Abreu et al., 23 studies in the span of 10 years between 2009 and 2019 reported various cases in which LGBTQ identifying students have reported harassment. 81% of students reported having been verbally assaulted, 26% of students reported having been physically harassed, 95% of LGBTQ students have heard homophobic remarks, 92 have heard negative comments about gender expression in schools within the past year, and 11 had been assaulted in 1 year alone. So in a study conducted by Day et al., consisting of 398 transgender students, results suggested that transgender youth were more likely to experience more bullying, victimization, and a more hostile school environment than students who did not identify as transgender. So, through an intersectional lens, unfortunately, there isn't very much research at the moment gathered on marginalized communities. However, there is a credible research within the Black LGBTQ community that has been conducted. In a 2020 study conducted by Trong et al., 1,534 Black LGBTQ students reported that they have been experiencing harassment or assault in regards to their sexual orientation and gender identity and race. When it comes to students who have been harassed or assaulted, only 27% of students who experience harassment or assault never reported it to school staff. And for the 43% of students who did decide to report these incidents to staff members, they reported that staff did not take any action. So because of how traumatic bullying can be for victims and survivors, I wanted to discuss the effects that bullying has on LGBTQ youth. Multiple studies have come out and shown that as a hostile school climate has an intense impact on LGBTQ students' mental health as well as their academic performance. In fact, school-based victimizations of LGBTQ youth has been linked directly to a number of academic outcomes, such as lower GPAs, lower aspirations to pursue post-secondary education, and truancy. The reported GPA for students who had been bullied for their sexual orientation and gender expression were significantly lower than students who were less often harassed or assaulted. In 2020, 40% of LGBTQ students reported that they had suicidal ideation or consideration, and unfortunately, 30% of LGBTQ students did attempt to commit suicide. While these numbers are still high, before the introduction of gay-straight alliances in school, which we will discuss later, in 1989, federal reports showed that 1/3 of all youth suicides were carried out by gay and lesbian youths. Coming out or disclosing one's sexual orientation publicly can be very beneficial as it can build resilience and overall better mental health. However, it is all reliant on response to their coming out. If met negatively, they face a lot of possibility of facing harassment and bullying, which can negatively impact them emotionally and psychologically. Negative reactions to disclosure in general have been found to be associated with increases in alcohol and drug use among LGBTQ youth. So schools can and have been very beneficial in their impacts towards LGBTQ students and their well-being. One big implementation that I mentioned earlier was the introduction of GSA, also known as the Gay-Straight Alliance. The Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, also known as GLSEN, reported that GSA association and staff allyship had made a positive difference in the lives of LGBTQ students and had helped encourage them to pursue higher scholarly achievement. One study reported that LGBTQ students who attend schools that have GSA communities were 3 times as likely to feel safe being out at school and were much less likely to hear homophobic remarks compared to students who were attending schools in which there were no GSAs. Many schools have school psychologists that were found to be extremely influential on LGBTQ youth lives by creating and implementing LGBTQ inclusive policies, starting and supporting GSAs, modeling acceptance for other students, recognizing LGBTQ identities, and providing counseling and engagement for benefiting their well-being. With this being said, it is also very important to highlight ways in which schools and administrations have unfortunately failed LGBTQ identifying students, as by acknowledging these issues, we can learn from these mistakes. Unfortunately, there has been quite a lot of outwards discrimination within towards LGBTQ community students. In 2011, a national school climate survey showed that more than 1 in 5 students claimed that their schools or personnel discriminate against LGBTQ students. This is sadly extremely prevalent among formal events such as homecomings, dances, and proms. Students found themselves unaccepted in these schools' events. Students remarked that same-sex couples were either not allowed to attend school dances together or were penalized for doing so with their partners. These penalties look like different things, but one penalty that was mentioned quite a lot was the cost of tickets for these events being much more expensive for queer couples. So for couple tickets, they would cost about $90, but for people who are single or would be attending these events by themselves, the tickets would cost $60. And because nobody would sell same-sex couples the couple-priced package, the $90, they would have to spend $120, so $60 each to go to the same event that would cost a heterosexual couple $30 less. When it comes to the attendance of same-sex couples to events, administration would require both principal and parental approval for these couples to attend. This heavily jeopardizes the safety of any queer students who may not be out yet or who may be in a homophobic and dangerous living situation, as the only way for them to attend would be receiving parental signed approval. That being said, students reported that school personnel had revealed their sexuality to their parents as a result of disciplinary action for engaging in PDA, which straight couples would never receive the same punishment for. Another way the administration has been punishing LGBTQ students is through the usage of restrooms for transgender students. In 2025, 41% of transgender students were stopped or punished for using bathrooms that aligned with their gender. And this was mentioned before, but I should mention this again, that when it comes to bullied students who report their abuse to administration, 43% of those who did said that staff did nothing to negate this issue or deal with the perpetrators. For my call to action, I want to highlight the positive impacts in which the schools have been creating safe spaces and boosting the morale of LGBTQ students. For starters, I would absolutely keep in GSA and school psychologists. School psychologists provide competent and ethical counseling and services to students, especially LGBTQ students who may be needing them a little bit more. They create and support GSA programs and bring visibility to student issues. That being said, for GSA, it is a necessary positive environment outside of the home, which some students may need, in which they can feel accepted within their community and themselves, as well as receive mentorship from supportive staff who encourage academic success. When it comes to things I would introduce to schools, when it comes to the acceptance and support of LGBTQ learning and their journey through the educational system, I would first recommend the introduction of LGBTQ friendly and affirming curricula. It could be through books, LGBTQ history, and LGBTQ historical figures and activists. I would also mandate LGBTQ development and training for all school staff to make sure that our administration does not continue to perpetrate the homophobia and disparities to our youth. I would establish learning opportunities for staff to define what is considered bullying and create safe spaces for LGBTQ students to discuss experiences in order to build connection and empathy within the community. Here are my sources and citations, so we can take a moment to pause here. And thank you very much for watching.